Hi everyone, welcome and thank you for joining us at the Doing Business Better webinar. Titled for today is Develop Clear, Standardised and Documented Standard Operating Procedures. I'm your host Shandell Devencentis. Before we begin, I just want to go through some housekeeping with you. You'll be put on mute during the presentation to reduce background noise and disruptions. Should you wish to ask a question, please raise your hand or type the question in the chat box. If you are dialing in, please press *9. The presenters ask that all questions are to be saved to the end. I'll now pass you to Stephen Gretsch of Doing Business Better. Thanks, Stephen.
No worries, thanks for that. So welcome back to those that have joined us from last week and the previous sessions. I hope you get a lot of value from those sessions, and also welcome to new people who are joining us for the first time. My name's Stephen Gretsch. I'm a director of my own company called Doing Business Better, and basically work with businesses to help them make processes much easier, faster, and more enjoyable for staff, but also deliver a better experience for the customers. And what I'm really trying to do is provide yourselves with, I suppose, a lot of tips and tools that you can use in your organisation to help you save time and money in the way you operate, so that you're more productive and you're making more money because you've got more time on the tools rather than doing things which are not adding value. So I'll look forward to some questions that you might have a bit later on. So just for those that aren't familiar with the company, basically a process improvement company, and lots of experience in various sectors, more than 150 different companies, and help them transform their business operations to become more productive and free up time for staff. These sessions we're up to now, session number 6, and what we'll be doing today, we'll be looking at developing how we develop clear, standardised and documented standard operating procedures. And today's really a build-up of a lot of the type of things that we've been discussing prior to this, and really working on, how we map the process, how we see problems and come up with a better process. Now we're really just talking about how do we cement those gains. So I really want to be able to focus on how we develop quality procedures and enable staff to follow those procedures, so you get the most benefit of having best practice achieved in your organisation. So standard operating procedures are documented processes a company has in place to ensure that goods and services are produced or delivered consistently every time. So it's really then developing a step-by-step guide detailing a prescribed method of how you should run your process, who does what, how they do it, when they do it, what technology they use. So they've got a very simple way of following it, and a good standard operating procedure should be also very specific and descriptive about the quality or standard required to be performed or delivered every time. And they should be written. And this is the bit that I just want to focus on with you today, because as we saw with the images from a previous session in front of you now, where the top 2 sheets of paper are a current process, an existing process, and the bottom sheet is the better and improved process, what we really want to do is be able to have staff follow the bottom process, which is the improved process, because you can tell it takes a significantly less amount of time to do, and we want them to do it consistently and follow those processes, so that we have everyone doing it the same way as far as practical, and doing it the quickest and easiest way, because we worked out the best way possible. And whilst this really makes good and perfect sense, that if you have a standard operating procedure, then staff, who perform the work would be performing the work in the best way to the quality standard the business requires. And then, but the question I've got is why so many businesses have no standard operating procedures, or, if they do, why are they old? I go someplace and they're out of date, or you can't find them, or they become less meaningful because someone's written something and it's so many versions ago, and things have changed so much that they're useless. Also, some of them are really hard to read. They're really thick in terms of a lot of content, lots of words, and if you're in the computer space, you know, a lot of people can't find them on systems or drives. So, you know, it really becomes, you know, why is it that when you have a documented standard procedure, staff don't even follow it? Well, mostly standard operating procedures are hard to follow, as I was saying before, and sometimes they give a real simple view of, you know, what you have to do, and they do it at a high level. Whereas I'm a big believer of giving people some detail and an agreed way of doing it the best way possible so that they can achieve the process consistently. And I'll point out some tips shortly as to what you could be doing to make your process a lot better. But as I was saying before, they should be written on the process, and they should be written on the process workflow in detail, and not, you know, we do this, this, and this. But in fact, there's lots more steps. So it needs to be developed and written based on a better process. And what I mean by that is that if we just start writing down what we think the process is, then you're going to get not the best result for the business. And what's really important is what we were doing in previous sessions, because now we're looking at cementing the gains from previous sessions, is work out all the steps that are involved and work out how it goes wrong and what goes wrong so we can come up with a better process. So if you recall, just to refresh, we looked at a process on the top row on this one, the current process, and it was messy. And there was lots of colours, different people doing different things and going ring around the rosy and going back and forward and all that sort of stuff. And then we said, well, okay, well, we start doing the problem solving. There's a whole range of things we look at to make the process better, and we come up with a better process, the sheet on the bottom row. Now, that's the one we need to write up the good procedure about. That's the one that we need to have a better process, a process written up so people can follow it. And if we do this, and really depends on how well we explain it to people, train people to be competent to use it, then all you have to do is follow the process. And we need to look at how we write those up and communicate it to people. But there's no point in writing that process, because that's a mess. That's a dog's breakfast. And there's lots of rework, double handling. What we need to do is first map the process. That's why we had the previous sessions about this, to come up with what are the problems and issues, what can we do differently to come up with a better process. And that, which is the bottom row, is the one we need to base our standard operating procedures and nail it so that the business retains forever the gains of freeing up the time, because there's a lot less steps on the bottom one than there is in the top one. So now we need to write them up. And standardization really means making it to conform to a standard. And if you can document and specify the standard and how to achieve the standard, then this, which may be quality of what you're doing or how long it will take, or maybe the materials you use to perform the task. If the process is standardized, which the bottom one is, because we come up with a better way that all we do is follow it, then the operator who's using it, as long as they're trained competent, as I said before, the operator is then given clear and a simple process to follow. And we just need to write that up, because we don't have to write anything different. We need just to write these steps down in a format that's best for the type of audience, because sometimes people like a lot of words, some people like pictures. So I'll show you different styles in a moment, but it's really important that we get the process right first before we start writing procedures, because all you could be doing is writing, you know, procedures on a crappy process. We want to get the process right first, then write it up. And most businesses don't operate this way, and they have multiple failure points along the way when they do this sort of stuff, and because they haven't approached it the right way. And businesses fail to have and regularly use standard operating procedures, you know, have a real nightmare with, and they don't maintain them. They don't think they're important enough often. They don't have the time to do this and maintain them, and they don't keep them current, so they don't become, so they easily become out of date even if they had a dip at it. And sometimes they also fear that they don't know how to really write them really well. So this is where I can step in and give you some assistance if you need it, or they don't have confidence to write them themselves. So if they start to write procedures that aren't really based on a good process on this, then we're already got a foundation that's a bit shaky. So I'll give you some tips now just on how to approach that. So what we're trying to do with the standard operating procedures is make sure it's detailed enough on a better process, a good process that people can follow and be able to deliver it, no matter if it's John, Peter, Mary, or Mark, and understand how to get things done the right way and done once and done well. And that's the real important part of that sort of story. And if you do that, it's a lot more efficient. You've got better quality, better customer experience. People are doing what they're supposed to do when they're supposed to do it to the standard that you're setting, the time frame that you're setting, the quality that you're setting. And if you do all that, then because we don't have as many stickers as we had before, then you're eliminating a lot of activity, which is not adding value and just consuming your labour time and therefore your profits. So we want to make sure the procedures have taken out all those things that create errors, defects, rework, and they create really good communication and compliance. So we need to make sure they're easy to read and not too wordy, not too long. And what I mean by that is that, you know, a good procedure, if it's in a more detailed sense, doesn't have to be more than, you know, three to 4 pages. Literature says that if a procedure is written up that's 13 pages or more, no one ever reads it. They just skim over it. And then when they skim over it, you've got real problems, because then they tend to think of, you know, it means this and means that, and then they've got the variation again, because then people are starting to, I suppose, put their own interpretation on headlines. I mean, you know, you would have read newspapers and seen headlines but not read the content. When it's too wordy, people do that. And what we should be having is a short, sharp document that follows the map. And therefore we should attach the map, the process map, the better process to the standard operating procedure, so that, because some people, you know, like to see things, some people like to read things, some people like images and all that. So we need to be able to respond to the different senses that people have, because some people like things in different ways. You know, you go back to when you were at school, some people like to hear things, some people like to see things, some people like to touch things and write things. So we need to make sure that we're covering it. And a better way to do that is to provide procedures which are written, which have a flow diagram at the back, going back to having, you know, a documented map, not a sticky note one, but a typed up one, and I can help with that. And also, how do you train them? Do you just give them this piece of paper or send them an email, or do you sit down and explain it to them and see the whites of their eyes, as I call it, so that they understand and competently understand what the procedure is, not just leave them to their own devices to read, you know, read at your own leisure. Because when you start doing that, you know, some read it, some, if it's an email, they tick and flick, they never really read it. Unless you see face-to-face and whites of their eyes and you know that they get it, because sometimes, you know, they might be thinking of the football tomorrow or today that's starting, and start to think of other things and their mind drifts. So it's really important that you launch it properly. And the format of it is important as well. So just think of this, you know, as you're seeing in front of you now, you know, it could be a Word sort of document. That's just a covering sheet on the front with the version number and all that sort of stuff, and what's the process about. And then the following pages would be, you know, the definitions, and then just the steps we go through. As a thing from, it's a more operational thing where you're showing step 1 and some words but a picture, step 2 some words and a picture, so they actually can see what you're actually asking them to do and the way to do it as well. Best thing is to give them an opportunity to practice, but I think you're getting the general idea. It's also important to define the scope of the work, start and the end of the process that's in the procedure, which would then also be in the map. Because if you start going a bit too far out, it starts to lose some of the bite in it, and you also becomes too extensive and including other different areas. So whilst I believe in having detailed process maps, those are the steps you write up, but you don't have to waffle on in the content in terms of describing the steps. The steps should be very much so what is written in those sticky notes. And as I said before, just keep it short and sharp. If it's going to be a written document as a standard operating procedure, as a thing from that sort of A3 or A4 laminated thing with pictures, try to keep the content of the steps down to 3 or 4 pages. And if I'm describing, the electrician does this, and the manager does that, and the office manager does this, then putting those titles before the step is described is really good, because then it's very specific. This person does this person does this, and so on. It's important also to decide the purpose. What's the purpose of the standard operating procedure? Is it really to train staff on how to do the work the same way? Or is it a tick and flick kind of thing? So some people, they write all these procedures just because we've got auditors coming in and all that kind of stuff, but they're not going to be used after the auditor's gone. Well, you might be great, you've got through a compliance issue, but you waste a lot of time doing this sort of thing because you're never going to use it. So it's really, have a deep heart think as why would you be doing this? And if it's to grow your business because you want to have really good service, really efficient work, having staff having input into making a better process, because we went from an old crappy process to a much better process, and then we write that up, then there's going to be lots of benefits of you following this, these kind of seminars or webinars, and the way I've approached it to build it up to number 6 out of 9. If you start following these and start implementing these, or get some help from someone like myself to do this, you'll become a lot more productive. You'll spit the work out a lot quicker, and you'll make a lot more money, no doubt about it. The other bit is the flow diagram, as I said before. It's a useful tool to explain the process because some people are visual, as I said before. Some people like to read, some people like to see pictures. Make sure they're included at the back as an attachment. So you've got both the words and the flow diagrams, covers everyone's needs. And when we're doing this, obviously we need to involve the right people. And that then goes back to, okay, well, what are the key processes you got in the business, and how do we really work out, how do we improve it before we even write up procedures? So we need the right people in the room. We need to workshop with the staff who do the work to do that first level of mapping the process, identifying the problems, working out the root cause of those problems, which was the other previous session, session 4 or 3, and do some problem solving to come up with a better process. So you need to involve those people. And when you do involve those people and they come up with things that help them get rid of the pain in their work, they want to then do that better process, because now you've listened to them, they've been more engaged, and they're definitely more likely to follow the new procedure you've put in place. So there's a difference between just doing things to people and saying, here's the procedure, follow it, guys or girls, as distinct from, let's work out what is the current process, what are the issues, let's work out how we become a better process. All right, we've got a map of a new process. Now we need to write it up so you can follow it, and any new person comes on, all they can do is follow it. And then we got really good, standardized, clear process, and they're documented at the same time. And what's really important is you can maintain them later on. I'll get to that later on. So they do need to have that involvement, because they do have that buy-in. And also you've got an opportunity then to attach any checklists. And I think I may have mentioned in one of the previous sessions, checklists aren't there to dumb things down. They are really there to make sure we don't have errors. Because if you've got a really good checklist and you stick to it, then you shouldn't have any problems. You shouldn't have the issues because you've got a checklist. But if you don't follow the checklist and you do it off the top of your head, you might forget things. That's just human nature. That's what happens. That's what happens in my world when I look at processes that go wrong and people lose a lot of money or lose a customer. They are usually avoidable. And if you just have a good process, everyone follows it, but they have to be trained in it, and it has to be easily communicated. And a really clear, simple, standardized operating procedure, again with the diagram attached at the back, is the way to go to make sure you have good, consistent, standard work to the quality that the business wants, the time frame, and the way it needs to be delivered to your customers. And hey, and everyone's a winner. And the customers love it, and they'll come back for more, and they'll tell other people. You're sitting on gold. It's a great opportunity for you. You need to be consistent also. So if you're going to, what that means is if you're going to, write 3 or 4 procedures up, there's no point in, John doing one and Mary doing one, and John does it this way, and Mary does it that way, and Peter does it that way. They're all inconsistent look and feel. We need to have a single template. And I have my own sort of Word document template for those that are written, the 3 or 4 page type thing. That needs to be the same way, the same format, the same fonts, because you want to have consistency. This is all about reducing variation in the way people work. So you got to preach what you're talking about, and therefore the format of the document needs to be the same and consistent with just a change in the heading. You don't want people to have different styles and all that sort of stuff. That's not conducive to good practice. So they need to be created the same look and feel for people as well. So we don't want to have variable formats. And as in any good process, we need to make sure that we test the process which is on the maps and the procedures that we draft up first with the staff to make sure they understand and it's clear, so that we can refine them. So we don't just jump in and say, here it is, good luck, just follow this. We need to, write it up, pilot it, just test to see if it works for people, and then do any refinements, and before we launch straight into it, before we train people. And a lot of people don't do that also. That's another trap they fall into. They sit there, they think this is how it all works. They write it up, and then they just give it to staff, and they don't even, 1, explain it to them, and 2, they don't check to see if people understand it or it makes sense to them. And that's not very helpful. So what's really important is to get people involved in this and follow a systematic approach. That's what I take. A nice systematic approach which just nails it every time. And also, it's important that once you do all that down the track, that you're also just checking to make sure that people are following it. There's no point in doing all this work and no one's following it. And have you got ways of making sure people are following it? Is it in the job descriptions that they need to follow these procedures? If you just give them out and don't track it, then really you've got really no way of knowing is it working for you or not. So have a position on what to do if staff are not following the Standard Operating Procedure or SOP, which has been developed by the staff for the staff. So, and I'm sure a lot of places don't have that, and that's something for you to consider down the track. So once we had all these different webinars so far, we focus on measuring. That's part of this link back into Standard Operating Procedures. Do you measure that people are following the procedures? So there was links in all these different previous 5 sessions to build up to this. I've already covered one of the sessions about problem solving, root cause analysis. We showed the map. We talked about measurement. We need to develop performance measures to check that we are delivering against the Standard Operating Procedure. Just think, you've now created a process map of the best way everyone should be working. Yeah. Now, if you've done that, you want to make sure you reap the most benefit from it. So to do that, you need to write this procedure up and then teach people to follow it. Because if you don't, then you have loose cannons, people doing it all different ways, different lengths of time, different quality, different standards. That's not the most productive way to operate. And staff may find better ways of doing things. That's fantastic, but we don't want them to change the procedures. What we want them to do is raise it to the person who's in charge of this procedure, so they can consider how that might be beneficial or not, and incorporate it into the update of the procedure and the retraining of staff or the communication staff of the change. Things do change over time. We want to know about opportunities to improve even more, and we want to make sure we can update these procedures. So when I work with a place, the procedure might be, say, in a Word document, which can be edited and updated, and we do the maps, and that can be edited and updated as things change as well. So here's just a quick example of a visual procedure. There's, these are the steps, these are the equipment you need, and this is actually how you do it. You can see a picture. So a good quality Standard Operating Procedure is based on a good process, and that's why, I encourage people to, we map out the process together, again, to work out the issues and problems, come up with a better process, and then that's the one we write up in whatever format is suitable to the business you're in. Whether it's a flow diagram or visual picture one like you're seeing right now. And we're going to make sure that people are following it and it needs to be updated regularly. Here's another one, just as a simple sort of more manufacturing one with the step, the equipment, the safety, all that kind of thing. So standard operating procedures are really designed to make work easier to follow. They make training of new staff very easy because this is the process you need to follow. We work out the best way possible. You don't have to describe it to them and say you do this and this and you'll work it out, because then you'll get all different type of results and different type of quality and standards, and the costs will be all variable and it'll soak into your profit. But if we can get good procedures in place, they'll deliver a consistent result. They'll deliver the result that the business is expecting it to be delivered to their customers in terms of time it would take, the quality that they would get. And that's really important. And a good process and a good procedure will deliver the consistent performance and confidence about the costs of the business and the quality. And you need that reassurance. Here's a place I went to and I was asking where the procedures are. This is not a setup, this was dead set. And the procedures are just sitting there, and I just wrote the word dust. There's an actual photo. If you put the time and wrote that and it's sitting there, what a waste. And the scary bit is, what's going on in terms of the standards of the work that are performed. So there's no point in doing all this work and then only leave it just to catch dust. They need to be used. So people say to me, we're just too busy to do all this sort of stuff, to write all this stuff up. Well, I can help with that. That's no drama. But if you put the time in, then you'll save the time. There's no other way of putting it. You'll save the time, you'll increase the profitability of the business, because if you're doing things very productive and people are doing it the same way, and the same way is the better way, and the same way is the more cost-effective way. So you need to get some help to process maps, or you do it yourself, but you need to do those maps to then develop your standard operating procedures based on the maps. And if you do that, you'll work more effectively, more efficiently. Staff will enjoy their job more because they've been involved in coming up with better procedures, because they know how it really works and where things are going wrong or where they could do it differently, and they know how to make it simpler and easier for them to follow. And I suppose just the last thing or two is standard operating procedures, as I said before, it could be a Word document for something that's more wordy, or it could be a visual thing with a poster and pictures, but it should be a living and breathing document. So as things change, or as you think of things are better, or whatever technology changes, you edit that and you update that and you maintain that, but then you also tell people about it and you teach people about it and you train people about it competently. So then they're following a better process all the time and consistently, and you'll get this consistent result. So you got to keep on top of it, you got to keep training people. You always try to continuously improve, but you've got the great process that can only get better. And how good's that? So I hope you enjoyed today, and the webinar series, as we said, is all about reducing costs, improving experience, making quotes easier to produce, faster, and really reducing the cost to operate your business, which should increase your profits. If you release the capacity of staff, then they can do more jobs. So you need to crank up your sales. We'll look at some more techniques on the 25th of March. So I hope you'll be able to join us for that one and register for that. And that one's about creating a whole of organisational approach to continuous improvement. So please register for that one, and I look forward to speaking to you again. Again, if you have any questions, please send through. Maybe you already have, and I'll just check back in the office whether there's any questions. My details are on the bottom there. I'd be pleased to have a chat with you, an email, whatever you like, and see how I might be able to answer any other questions or point you in the right direction or pop out and see you.
Great. Thanks, Stephen. That was a great presentation today and quite interesting. I found the content very useful, and I hope that all our listeners did too. If you have any questions or comments, please raise your hand now or type the question in the chat box. You're more than welcome to remain anonymous, but if you feel comfortable, please introduce yourself. Okay. So So no calls or questions at this stage, but some other questions have come through that were sent to us via the chat functions while you're presenting, Stephen. The first question is, if I do not have existing standard operating procedures, how long would it take to prepare for them and have them written up?
Look, in your sector, that it's not. It wouldn't take very long at all. So, give you an example. Looking at a few half days to map out a process and write up procedures. So, I'd be looking at just a few days to knock over the whole business. It could be even less, actually, depending on if you're a larger business or a smaller micro business. But just to quickly map out your process and come up with a better process to write them up, it's only a few days' work, and it would make a huge difference.
Great. Okay. Another one that's come through. I can see the benefit for producing standard operating procedures, but I don't have the staff who could do this well for me. How do I go about getting them prepared for my business?
So if I understand the question right, you don't have the staff who can do it. Well, that's where sort of people like me fit in. If you don't have the skills or availability of people to do that, I'd step in and work with you to quickly map out your key processes, come up with the issues and problems, come up with a better process, and then just write them up for you. So you don't have to have the people and the skills in-house. Just give us a yell, my details at the bottom there, and I can help you do that.
Okay, fantastic. And the last question is, what's the simplest way of writing up procedures?
Well, my view of it's pretty clear. The best way to write them up is working out what's your target audience. I mean, if you go into a van, for example, you might have something stuck on the wall of the van with the pictures and a checklist, all that kind of stuff. For sort of whole end-to-end process, you might have a Word document written up, but you need to be able to do the mapping first, in my view, so that you can come up with how it currently works and how you can do it better, so that you're writing the procedure based on a better process. So the simplest way of writing them is some might be Word document and 2 or 3 pages based on a map, or it could be just a 1-page thing that you laminate and stick on a wall or a van or something, which shows the pictures of the step and the words of people, or a checklist to make sure people just follow it and they can just follow the pictures and follow the checklist, which is laminated, so they can tick them all off and then rub it off with a tissue at the end of it and do it again next time, and they will never fail if they just follow those.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks for today, Stephen, and thanks for taking the time to speak to our members as well. Thanks to all those who took time to join us. Recordings will be available if you want to rewatch and share this with your team. The next webinar will be next week, and a full schedule can be found on our website, so please register even if you can't attend, and we'll share the recording with you. Thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your day.